Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
After years of blindness following the fire, I regained my sight. But I decided not to tell my husband. He was texting someone right in front of me with a serious look on his face. And when I saw the messages, my legs gave way. I barely made it to the bathroom and dialed 911. 7 years, 2 months, and 14 days. That's exactly how long I lived in absolute darkness after that fire. I remembered every day, every hour of that countdown, because time became my only way of navigating a world that had suddenly disappeared. That October evening in 2016 is etched into my memory down to the smallest details. I was returning home from work later than usual. The architecture firm where I worked as lead designer was finishing a major city mall project. Everyone stayed late, discussing final touches. Rodolfo, my husband, was supposed to be at home. He had a free shift at the city hospital where he worked as a surgeon. I smelled smoke even before reaching our neighborhood. My heart began to pound faster, but I tried to convince myself it was just someone burning leaves in their yard. But the smoke grew thicker, the air more acrid, and when I turned onto our quiet street in the old district, I saw an orange glow above the roof of our house. I ran, not feeling the pavement beneath my feet. Neighbors shouting, fire truck sirens. All of it was in the background, in another reality. The only thought hammering in my head was, Rodolfo is home, Rodolfo is home, Rodolfo is home. Our 2-story house, bought with a mortgage 3 years earlier, blazed like a giant torch. Flames greedily licked the walls, burst out of every window on the first floor, reached for the wooden beams of the second. The heat was felt even from the street. I rushed to the entrance, but strong hands grabbed my arms. "Valeria, stop! There's no one inside!" shouted our neighbor Carlos, holding me firmly by the shoulders. "Rodolfo is in there. My husband is in there." I fought back, scratching and biting like a wild animal. "Let me go. I have to find him." "He's not. He left an hour ago in his car. I saw him." "Valeria, there's no one inside." But I couldn't believe it. Couldn't stop. Rodolfo was my entire world. Without him, life had no meaning. And when Carlos loosened his grip for a second, distracted by a firefighter's shout, I broke free and ran into the burning house. I remember the heat that hit my face like from an open furnace. I remember the smoke that instantly filled my eyes with tears and choked my breath. I remember screaming, "Rodolfo! Rodolfo, where are you?" I remember the crackling of burning beams above my head. And then there was an explosion. It must have been the gas cylinder in the kitchen. We had recently installed a gas stove. The blast wave threw me against the wall, and something hot and sharp slashed across my face. The pain was inhuman, blinding in the most literal sense. Then consciousness collapsed into a black void. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU of the city hospital. The first thing I felt was the smell of medical alcohol and the beeping of machines. My head was splitting, my face burned as if on fire, but the main sensation was something else. The world was gone. I saw only darkness. "Rodo!" I croaked with dry lips. "Rodolfo, are you here?" "Valeria!" His voice was right beside me, his warm hand covering mine. "Valeria, can you hear me?" "I hear you. Rodolfo, I can't see anything." "Nothing at all. This is temporary, right? Tell me it's temporary." Silence. A long, terrifying silence that said more than words ever could. "Valeria," Rodolfo's voice trembled. "The doctors say. They say the corneal damage is very severe. The burns are deep, but we'll get treatment, yes? We'll overcome everything. I won't leave you, do you hear? I will never leave you." At that moment, his words were my lifeline in an ocean of despair. The following weeks were hell. Endless bandages, surgeries, procedures. The doctors tried to save whatever could be saved, but the burns were too deep. The cornea of both eyes was so badly damaged that there was no hope for vision restoration. "We'll try all possible methods," the head of the department told me. "Maybe in a few years, medicine will discover new ways to treat such injuries." But deep down, I knew The doctors didn't believe in a miracle. And how could they? Looking at my disfigured face in the mirror, the same mirror Rodolfo had removed from my room. The first months after being discharged from the hospital, I didn't want to live. I simply saw no point in existing in eternal darkness. I didn't want to learn how to walk around the house by touch, didn't want to study Braille, didn't want to accept the thought that now I was a burden to everyone. Rodolfo was incredibly patient. He took a long leave, then another, and eventually switched to part-time at the hospital so he could spend more time with me. He learned alongside me, studied techniques for helping blind people, read specialized literature, consulted with experts. "Valeria," he told me, whenever I broke down crying in despair, "we'll get through this. We definitely will. The main thing is, we're together." He learned how to guide me so that I felt relatively confident walking. He rearranged all the furniture in the house to make it easier for me to navigate. He labeled all jars and boxes in the kitchen in Braille. He bought me a talking clock, calculator, and blood pressure monitor. "Tell me what our new apartment looks like," I would ask him. After the fire, the house was beyond repair, so we moved to a rented 2-bedroom apartment in another neighborhood. "It's bright," he patiently described every time. "Big windows in the living room face south. The sun is there all day. There's a view of a small park where children play. You can hear their laughter. The kitchen is small but modern, with good appliances. The bedroom walls are light blue. You remember that's your favorite color." I nodded and tried to imagine blue. But blue for me had become only a memory from my past life. Gradually, very slowly, I began to adapt. I learned to cook simple meals by touch, memorized the location of every item in the house down to the centimeter. Rodolfo bought me a special keyboard with voice support for the computer. I even tried to return to work, giving phone consultations to beginner architects, sometimes recording audio lectures on design basics. But the income was a pittance compared to what I used to earn as a lead architect. After a year and a half, we got Luna, my guide dog, a beautiful German shepherd with an amazingly gentle and intelligent nature. With her, the world became a little wider, a little safer. I could go outside alone, walk to the nearest store, to the clinic, even stroll in the park. Rodolfo rejoiced at each of my small achievements. "Valeria, today you went to the pharmacy all by yourself and bought everything we needed," he said, hugging me. "I'm so proud of you. You're amazing." And I believed in his pride. I believed in his love. I believed that we were overcoming this ordeal together. In the 3rd year of our new life, we even began planning for children. The doctors assured me that blindness wouldn't prevent me from becoming a mother and carrying a healthy child. Moreover, many blind women successfully raise children. Rodolfo was thrilled by the idea. "Just imagine, Valeria," he dreamed, lying next to me in bed. "The baby will see the world through your eyes, and you will see him with your heart. We'll have a very special child, sensitive and understanding." We tried, went to doctors, took tests, but pregnancy never came. Month after month, year after year. The doctors shrugged. Physically, we were both healthy. There was no medical obstacle. "Perhaps it's the stress from the trauma," suggested the gynecologist. "The body hasn't fully recovered yet. It needs time." "Maybe we should see a psychologist," Rodolfo suggested. "Work through the consequences of the trauma on a psychological level." We tried that too. We went to a family psychologist, and I attended individual sessions. But pregnancy still didn't happen. By the 5th year, I began to feel like a completely inadequate woman. Blind, infertile, dependent on my husband for everything. What could I give this wonderful man who had sacrificed his career and personal freedom for me? "Rodolfo," I told him, "maybe you should find another woman, a healthy one who can give you children." "Valeria, what are you saying?" He hugged me tighter. "The most important thing is that we're together. Children are wonderful, of course, but even without them we'll be happy. We have each other, and that's what matters most." Back then, I still believed those words. Over the years, we visited every possible specialist in the country and abroad. Rodolfo spent enormous amounts of money on consultations with leading ophthalmologists, took me to top clinics in the US and Europe. We tried experimental treatments, the newest medications, but nothing helped. The damage is too deep, the doctors concluded. Unfortunately, modern medicine is still powerless in such cases. After each failed trip, Rodolfo grew darker and more irritable, but I blamed it on disappointment and fatigue. "Don't be upset, my dear," I comforted him. "Maybe in a few years new technologies will appear." "Yes, maybe," he replied, but his voice no longer carried the same hope. By the 7th year of our life in darkness, I began to notice changes in Rodolfo's behavior. Not drastic ones, not the kind you could easily point out, but different. Before, he always told me in detail about his day at work, about difficult surgeries, interesting cases, colleagues, medical news. Now his reports were brief and formal. "How was work?" "Fine, nothing special. Just a normal day." "And how did that complicated surgery you mentioned yesterday go?" "It went fine. Everything's good." Before, we spent evenings together. He would read to me aloud, literature, medical articles, the news. We listened to music, watched movies, and he would carefully describe to me what was happening on screen. We discussed the plots, argued about characters. Now he increasingly said he was tired, that he needed to prepare for tomorrow's surgeries, that he had a headache. Our evenings passed in silence. He watched TV or sat at the computer while I listened to audiobooks through headphones. Before, we made love regularly and passionately. For me, physical intimacy was especially important. The only way to feel complete closeness with my husband. The only way to forget myself and feel like a desired woman instead of a burden. Now intimacy had become rare and mechanical, as if he were merely fulfilling a marital duty. "Rodolfo, do you still love me?" I asked him one evening when he turned away right after making love. "What kind of silly question is that?" His voice carried irritation. "Of course I love you. I'm just very tired from work. We're constantly overwhelmed at the department." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But blindness had sharpened all my other senses to the extreme. I heard things I hadn't noticed before. I heard him tossing and turning at night in bed, as if something tormented him inside. I smelled an unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, light, floral, unmistakably feminine. I noticed how his breathing changed when the phone rang, how differently he said hello when he thought I couldn't hear. "It's work," he explained when I asked about the frequent phone calls. "The new head of the department is very demanding. He calls for any reason." But I remembered Rodolfo's colleagues' calls. They always sounded businesslike, precise, without unnecessary emotion. These new calls carried a kind of intimacy, even when Rodolfo answered in monosyllables. Friends came over less and less often. Before, we regularly hosted dinners, gatherings, celebrations. Our house had always been full of guests. Now Rodolfo increasingly said, "Valeria, you get tired of large groups of people. Let's just stay home, the two of us, in peace." But the two of us barely talked anymore. He withdrew into himself, becoming more and more distant. I tried to find explanations for these changes. I told myself that 7 years is a long time, that he had the right to be tired, that every relationship goes through different stages, that caring for a blind wife could truly wear someone out. But with each day, the emptiness between us grew, and I increasingly felt not like a beloved wife, but an obligation, something he wanted to get rid of, but couldn't. In early autumn 2023, Rodolfo first brought up something that would later change my entire life. "Valeria," he said at dinner, cautiously, as if testing the waters. I was thinking, what if we tried a new approach to your rehabilitation? "What approach?" I asked warily. His voice carried an unnatural cheerfulness. "You see, there are special centers for people with visual impairments. Not asylums, of course, but rehabilitation centers. They offer professional training, socialization, psychological support." "Rodolfo, I already went through a rehabilitation program after the accident. No, Valeria, this is different. It's about a comprehensive program for adapting to independent living. You could make friends there, people who understand you, who've been through the same. You could gain independence. You want to send me away somewhere? No, darling, he protested too quickly. It's not about sending you away. It's about your growth, about you becoming more independent. Think about it. You need to learn to live on your own, and He paused, choosing his words. And I would be able to work more, to earn money for treatment, for our needs. What treatment, Rodolfo? The doctors said my case is hopeless. Medicine doesn't stand still. New technologies, new methods are appearing, but all of it is very expensive, and working part-time, I can't provide for us properly. His arguments had their logic. Indeed, because he had to constantly care for me, Rodolfo couldn't work fully. His income had nearly halved, and specialized treatments in foreign clinics required huge amounts of money. I'll think about it, I said. That's good, he replied happily. Don't rush your decision. But you know, Valeria, I think it could be good for both of us. After that conversation, the subject of the rehabilitation center kept coming up. Rodolfo didn't pressure me, but he constantly offered new arguments. I met a doctor whose wife is also blind. She went through such a program and now works as a masseuse, fully supporting herself. I read in an article that visually impaired people who undergo professional rehabilitation feel much more confident and happy. Valeria, haven't you thought that it might be good for you to talk to people like you? They'd understand you better than I ever could. And I began to lean toward the idea. Maybe he was right after all. Maybe I needed to become more independent, to stop hanging on him like a weight. All right, I said at the end of October. Let's try. But first I want to go there on a tour to see what kind of place it is. Of course, darling. Rodolfo beamed with joy. I've already looked into it. There's a very good center in the suburbs. We can go there this weekend. But we were never destined to go to the center. On November 6th, 2023, something happened that doctors still call a medical miracle. Rodolfo left early for work. He said he had a complicated surgery. I woke up around 8, as usual, fed Luna, and started making breakfast. I was standing at the stove, stirring scrambled eggs, when suddenly I saw light. At first, I thought it was a hallucination. Over the past 7 years, this had happened a few times. The doctors had warned me that the brain could sometimes fill in visual images, especially under stress. But this wasn't some phantom or illusory light. This was real, bright morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen window and laying golden stripes across the white countertop. I squeezed my eyes shut. My eyes hurt from the unaccustomed brightness. They watered. Then I carefully opened them again, and I saw my hand. My own hand, which I hadn't seen in 7 years. Olive skin, long slender fingers, with the wedding ring Rodolfo had placed on my finger 9 years ago. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might faint from emotion. Slowly, very slowly, I raised my head and saw our kitchen. The kitchen I had known only from Rodolfo's descriptions and from my tactile impressions. White glossy cabinets, gray ceramic floor tiles, yellow cotton curtains on the window, the very ones I had bought back in our old house before the fire, which Rodolfo had saved and brought here. Modern appliances, microwave, coffee maker, toaster. Not exactly as I had imagined, but everything was beautiful simply because I could see it. I went to the hallway mirror, holding onto the wall. My legs trembled with excitement. What I saw in the reflection made me clutch the edge of the cabinet. It wasn't the Valeria I remembered from photos 7 years ago. That woman had been a young 30-year-old with long dark hair and bright green eyes. This one was older, with a short practical haircut, wrinkles around her eyes and mouth. And the eyes themselves, they weren't as bright anymore. Clouded, with whitish spots and scars from burns. But seeing, alive. On my left cheek and forehead were scars from that fire, pale, but visible traces of the flames. I cried and laughed at the same time, staring at my reflection. 7 years. 7 endless years I had lived in complete darkness. And now, my first impulse was to grab the phone and call Rodolfo at work. Rodolfo, Rodolfo, I can see! My sight is back! I even began dialing the number, but suddenly stopped. What if it was temporary? What if in an hour or a day, the sight vanished again? Why give him false hope, only to disappoint us both all over again? No, I decided. First, I had to make sure it was permanent. I would go to the doctor, get an examination, and then we'd celebrate properly. Mark this miracle as it deserved. I spent that day as if in a fairy tale. I walked around the apartment, looking at every item, every little detail. Our photographs on the shelves, how young we looked in our wedding pictures. The books Rodolfo had read aloud to me. There were far more than I had imagined. My houseplants, which I had watered blindly, guided by the smell of soil. The ficus had grown huge, and the violets bloomed in lush purple crowns. Luna lay at my feet, watching me with her intelligent brown eyes. She seemed to understand that something had drastically changed in our lives. For the first time in 7 years, I saw the face of my faithful friend and helper. Things weren't exactly as I had imagined them over the years, but everything was wonderful simply because I could see it. When Rodolfo came home that evening, I struggled to contain the emotions overflowing inside me. "Hi, darling," he said, kissing me on the cheek as usual. "How are you? How was your day?" "Good," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And how was your surgery?" "It was difficult, but we managed. The patient is stable." Now I could see his face, the face I hadn't seen for 7 years. Rodolfo had changed, of course. He'd aged, wrinkles marked his forehead and around his eyes. His hair had thinned. But it wasn't just natural aging. Something in his expression, in the way his shoulders slumped, in the way he avoided my gaze. He looked guilty, tired, or simply detached. At dinner, I continued studying him, careful not to reveal myself. He told me something about work, but his eyes were distant. Several times he pulled out his phone to check messages. "Who's writing?" I asked. "A colleague," he quickly replied, slipping the phone into his pocket. "About tomorrow's planning meeting." But I remembered how his colleagues used to call or message before. He had reacted completely differently to professional contacts. After dinner, Rodolfo said he was very tired and went to bed early. I stayed in the living room, sat in an armchair, and thought for a long time. What if my sight hadn't returned by accident? What if it was truly a miracle, but a miracle with a purpose? Maybe I was meant to see something, to understand something important? The next morning, I decided not to tell Rodolfo about my sight just yet. At least not until I saw the doctor and confirmed that it wasn't temporary. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Montero, our family ophthalmologist, for the end of the week, telling the receptionist it was just a routine checkup. And in the meantime, I could watch. I could see what was happening around me, while everyone still believed I was blind. The following days opened my eyes, in every sense of the word. On Tuesday morning, Rodolfo got ready for work differently than before. He used to dress quickly, on autopilot, not caring much about his appearance. After all, he spent most of the day in a white coat anyway. But now he stood for a long time in front of the bedroom mirror, carefully styling his hair with special gel. He tried on several shirts, picking the best one. He sprayed himself with expensive cologne, the same one I had given him 2 years ago for his birthday, but which he had only worn on special occasions. "Rodolfo, you're getting ready unusually carefully today," I remarked, standing in the bedroom doorway and watching his preparations. "Eh?" he startled, as if he hadn't expected me to notice. "No, just getting ready like always." But it wasn't like always. In 7 years, I had memorized all his habits, all the sounds he made in the mornings, the time he took to get ready, the sequence of his actions. Now everything was different. On Wednesday, he came home with a bouquet of expensive roses. "Just because," he said, kissing me and handing me the flowers. I passed by a flower shop, saw them, and thought of you. The roses were beautiful indeed, deep red, with large buds, costly. But something about the gesture felt unnatural, forced, as if he were trying to atone for some guilt or distract my attention. On Thursday, I noticed that he had started hiding his phone from me. Before, he could leave it anywhere, on the table, the nightstand, the kitchen counter. After all, I couldn't read the screen anyway. Now he always kept it with him, and when he went to shower or to the bathroom, he took it along. "Rodolfo, why don't you leave your phone in the bedroom when you go wash up?" I asked innocently. "You used to always do that." Well, I got used to carrying it," he answered a little awkwardly. "You never know, the hospital might call me in an emergency." But I knew the hospital's procedures. If it were truly urgent, they called the landline, and in normal cases, it could certainly wait until morning. On Friday morning, something happened that finally convinced me I had to continue keeping my recovered sight a secret. Rodolfo thought I was still asleep. He carefully got out of bed, picked up his phone, and went out to the balcony, closing the door quietly behind him. But I saw his silhouette through the thin curtains. He dialed a number and spoke softly, tenderly, completely unlike how he had spoken to me lately. "Hi, sunshine. Yes, I miss you too. No, she's still asleep. We can talk. Tonight? I don't know. I'll have to think how to tell her I'll be late at work. All right, I'll call you later. Kisses." Sunshine. When was the last time he had called me that? At least 3 years ago, if not more. When he came back to the bedroom, I pretended I was just waking up. "Good morning," I said, stretching. "Good morning, my love," he replied. My love. How easily the words slipped from his lips, even though just a minute earlier he'd been calling someone else sunshine. On Friday afternoon, I went to see Dr. Montero. I told Rodolfo I was going to the clinic for routine blood tests. Luisa Montero had been treating me since the first days after the fire. She was not only a top-class professional, but also a deeply compassionate person. All those years, she had sincerely sympathized with my condition and had done everything possible to ease my suffering. "Valeria," she said when I entered her office, "how are you? How are you feeling?" "Doctor," I replied, "I have incredible news for you. My sight has returned." She literally jumped in her chair. "What? When? How?" "The day before yesterday in the morning. Suddenly, I woke up, and I could see. This is unbelievable," she exclaimed, jumping to her feet and pacing the office. "Valeria, such cases are extremely rare. We need to run a full examination immediately." The examination took almost 3 hours. MRI, CT scan, numerous specialized tests. By the evening, Dr. Montero was able to state with confidence, "Valeria, this truly is a medical miracle. The scars on your cornea have become significantly thinner, almost dissolved. There has been tissue regeneration that we cannot explain from the standpoint of modern science. Your visual acuity is about 70% of normal, but that's more than enough for a full life. Is it permanent? Judging by the results, yes. All indicators are stable. Moreover, the regeneration process may still be ongoing. It's possible your sight will improve even more. Luisa, may I ask you not to tell anyone about this for now, including my husband?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "But why? Rodolfo will be so happy. He's fought for your recovery for so many years, spent enormous amounts of money on treatment." "I'll tell him myself," I promised. "But a little later. I want to get used to it first." Dr. Montero nodded with understanding. "Of course, that's your right. But don't delay too long. News like this needs to be shared with loved ones." On my way home, I kept thinking about what to do next. Part of me wanted to run to Rodolfo immediately, tell him about the miracle, and bring us back to that happy time when we loved each other. But another part, the one that had overheard his morning call to the mysterious sunshine, wanted the truth. Who was this woman? How long had their affair been going on? What did he really feel for me? And the biggest question, did he still love me at all? Or had I long since become a burden he didn't know how to get rid of? On Saturday morning, Rodolfo told me that he was urgently called to the hospital. "Valeria, I have an emergency surgery, a serious case. I don't know when I'll be free. I may be very late." "It's all right, darling," I replied. "I'll wait. I'll manage on my own." He got ready quickly, kissed me on the cheek, and left. I went to the window and watched him get into the car. At the last moment, he pulled out his phone and called someone. Even from the third floor, I could see how his expression changed. He was smiling. After he left, the apartment became very quiet. I wandered from room to room, looking at things I hadn't seen in 7 years. Photographs in frames, our once happy life, books he had read aloud to me, gifts we had exchanged on wedding anniversaries. Then I decided to take advantage of his absence and explore what had been inaccessible to me all these years. I went into his study. I had never gone there before. Why would I? But now I could see everything. On the desk lay medical journals, work documents, pens, notebooks. In the corner stood our wedding photograph. We both looked young, in love, happy. I stared at that picture for a long time, remembering that day 10 years ago. Then I opened the desk drawers. The top stationery. The middle, work documents, reports, papers. And the bottom? In the bottom drawer was a folder labeled Personal. My heart started pounding faster. I knew I had no right to rummage through my husband's private things, but I couldn't stop myself. Too many strange things had piled up lately. Inside the folder were printed photographs. A woman. Young, beautiful, about 10 years younger than me. Blonde hair to her shoulders, blue eyes, a bright smile. In some pictures, she was alone, in others, with Rodolfo. They were hugging, kissing, laughing. They looked like a couple in love. Under the photos were printed WhatsApp messages. I recognized the phone number, the same one that had been calling Rodolfo for the past months. I began to read, "Rodolfo, I can't wait for our meeting tomorrow. How are things with your wife? You still haven't told her about us? I understand it's hard for you, but we plan to be together officially. Rodolfo, I'm already 28. I want a family, children. I can't wait any longer. Maybe it's time to tell Valeria the truth. She'll understand. You've sacrificed yourself for her for so many years." I read this woman's messages and felt my insides twist in pain. But worse were Rodolfo's replies. "Bella, I can't leave her just yet. She completely depends on me. Just a little more patience, sunshine. I'll find a way to solve this problem. She'll never agree to a divorce on her own. For her, I'm her whole world. I want children too, and I want them with you. But I need time to arrange everything properly." And then the correspondence became more explicit. "Rodolfo, maybe just tell her straight? That you've met someone else? That you want a divorce? Bella, it's not that simple. First, the apartment is in her name. It's an inheritance from her grandmother. In a normal divorce, I'd be left without a home. So what? We'll rent another place. And second, she receives a huge disability insurance, $2,000 a month from the hospital's insurance company where I work, plus disability pension, plus various benefits and allowances. As the husband of a first-degree invalid, I also qualify for additional payments and benefits." "Rodolfo, but money isn't everything." "Oh, it's everything. And third, just imagine, a respected surgeon leaving his blind, disabled wife for a young nurse. How would that look? My reputation, my career, it would all collapse. They'd kick me out of the hospital in disgrace." "What if we say that she agreed to the divorce herself?" "She'll never agree. I've hinted several times. She starts crying, says she'll kill herself without me, threatens to tell everyone I'm abandoning her, right to the newspapers. Rodo, but you can't live like this. And besides, she knows some of my, let's say, issues with the tax office. Remember I told you about private patients' paperwork? Not all of it was completely legal. If she talks about it during a divorce, I could face criminal charges for fraud." "I see. So what are you going to do?" "I've found a solution. I spoke to Esteban, the psychiatrist at our hospital. And then came the messages from the past few days, which made my hair stand on end. Esteban agreed to help for $500. Help how? He'll issue a certificate saying my wife has developed a mental disorder as a result of prolonged blindness, depression with suicidal tendencies, hallucinations, erratic behavior. Rodo, but that's a lie! An officially certified lie, with stamps and signatures. On the basis of this certificate, I can have her forcibly committed to a psychiatric hospital as legally incapacitated. And then what? And then, in psychiatric hospitals, things happen. Sometimes patients don't tolerate medications. Sometimes they have heart problems, especially those who've been under stress for a long time. Rodolfo, you're talking about murder! I'm talking about sparing an unfortunate woman from suffering, a woman who can't live a full life anyway, and at the same time, freeing us for happiness. That's terrifying. Bella, think about it. She suffers in her darkness. I suffer from guilt and lack of freedom. Why should we all suffer? This way, the apartment legally passes to me as a widower, the insurance payments too. No scandals, no suspicions. Everyone will only sympathize with the poor husband who lost his mentally ill wife. And if she resists hospitalization? I've already bought special drugs. I'll mix light tranquilizers into her food. She'll become sluggish, drowsy, incoherent. That will only confirm the diagnosis of mental disorder. Rodolfo, I'm so scared. This is a crime. Bella, we have no other way out. She keeps me like in a prison, with money, with threats, with her helplessness. I can't live like this anymore. When do you plan to start? On Monday. Esteban is already preparing the documents, and I have the drugs. I read through that exchange and felt the world collapse around me. My legs gave way, and I barely managed to reach the bathroom, where I locked myself inside. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against the door, trying to process what I had just read. My husband, the man I trusted more than anyone in the world, the man who had pretended for 7 years to love me faithfully, was planning to kill me. Not just leave me, not just divorce me, kill me. Coldly, deliberately, for money and for a new love. Tomorrow, Monday, he would begin slipping tranquilizers into my food. Then he would summon the bribed psychiatrist who would declare me insane. I would be taken to a psychiatric hospital where an accident would happen. And worst of all, no one would ever know that my sight had returned. In a psychiatric hospital, no one believes what patients say by definition. Panic swept over me in waves. What to do? How to survive? Run away from home? But where? I had no money. Rodolfo controlled all the accounts. No car. I didn't know how to drive. Almost no friends. Over 7 years, my circle had shrunk to a minimum. Tell someone? But who would they believe? The respected surgeon, or the blind, hysterical invalid? Besides, if I disappeared or started telling fantasies about my husband's plans, he would just say I had developed a mental disorder. Then the plan for forced hospitalization would look not like a crime, but like care. My hands were trembling with fear and rage, and then my gaze fell on the phone. The emergency number. I dialed it with shaking fingers. Emergency services, how can I help you? I need help, I whispered. My husband is planning to poison me and kill me. Are you safe right now? The operator asked in a calm, professional voice. Yes, he's not home, but he could return at any moment. Tell me what's happening. And I told everything. About the fire 7 years ago, the blindness, the return of my sight, which my husband didn't know about the messages I had found with his lover, about the plan with the fake diagnosis and forced hospitalization, about the tranquilizers and the accident in the asylum. These are very serious accusations, said the operator. Do you have evidence? Yes, the correspondence with his mistress. Everything is written out in detail there. All right. What you describe: preparation for murder, forgery of medical documents, planning forced hospitalization. These are serious crimes. A police unit is on its way to you now. And if my husband comes back earlier? Do not open the door to him. If he tries to force his way in, scream, pound on the walls, attract the neighbors' attention. We're already on our way. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. 2 police officers. Valeria Espinosa, we're here in response to your call. I opened the door. Lieutenant Vasquez and Sergeant Mendoza stepped into the apartment. Show us the evidence you mentioned, Mendoza asked. I led them to the study, opened the desk drawer. The officers carefully examined the printed correspondence, photographing each page. These are serious pieces of evidence, said Vasquez. A plan for forced hospitalization with forged documents, the use of psychotropic drugs without the patient's knowledge, and, essentially, a murder plot. Where is your husband now? Mendoza asked. He said he was at work, but in reality, he's with his mistress. Do you have any medications here at home that could be used for poisoning? We went to the kitchen. In the medicine cabinet, I found a pack of phenazepam that hadn't been there before. Here, I showed the officers. We've never had this drug. He bought it specifically for this. Mendoza photographed the package, confiscating it as evidence. Valeria, said Vasquez, we will set up an operation to catch your husband in the act. As soon as he tries to put the drugs into your food or drink, we'll arrest him. And what if he suspects something? We'll set up covert surveillance. We'll also give you a special emergency button. The moment your husband makes a move, press the button and we'll be there. Mendoza pulled a small device out of her bag, the size of a pager. This is the panic button. Keep it with you at all times. Once you press it, we'll receive a signal and arrive within 2 minutes. And if he tries to force me to drink something, then scream, resist, attract the neighbor's attention. We'll be right outside. We'll hear you. After installing several hidden cameras in the apartment and instructing me carefully, the police left. I was alone again, clutching the panic button in my hand. Now I knew I wasn't defenseless. There were people who wouldn't let Rodolfo carry out his monstrous plan. Rodolfo returned around 11 at night, cheerful and relaxed. "Hello, darling," he said, kissing me on the cheek as always. "How are you?" "How was your day?" "Good," I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. "And how was your surgery?" "It was a tough case, but we managed. The patient will live." He smelled of an unfamiliar perfume, light, floral, distinctly feminine. Bella's perfume. "Did you have dinner?" I asked. "Yes, I grabbed a bite at the hospital. And you?" "Me too. Go to bed. You must be tired." That night, he slept deeply and peacefully. Apparently, he had enjoyed his time with his mistress. And I lay beside him, thinking about how tomorrow this man would try to poison me. On Sunday morning, Rodolfo was in a great mood. He made breakfast, told funny stories from the hospital, was attentive and caring. The last day before the plan began. "Valeria," he said over lunch, "have you thought about that rehabilitation center we talked about?" "I have," I nodded. "And you know, I think you're right. Maybe it really is worth trying to become more independent." "Really?" His face lit up. "Valeria, I'm so glad you understand me." Of course he was glad. Tomorrow he wouldn't have to convince me to go to the center. I'd be taken to a psychiatric hospital against my will. On Sunday evening, he was unusually tender. He held me, whispered sweet words. We even made love, for the first time in months, and I understood. He was saying goodbye. In his mind, this was our last night of intimacy. "I love you," he said, kissing me. "And I love you," I replied. And it wasn't a lie. I truly loved him. The Rodolfo I thought I knew for 7 years. But that Rodolfo, as it turned out, had never really existed. Monday began as usual. Rodolfo got up, showered, had breakfast. He was getting ready for work calmly, without any unnecessary fuss. But I could see it. He was wound up like a spring. "Valeria," he said, kissing me goodbye, "today might be a tough day. If I'm late, don't worry." "All right, darling. Good luck at work." After he left, I checked the emergency button. It worked. Then the police called. "Valeria, how are you?" Did your husband do anything suspicious? Not yet. He left for work as usual. We're watching your house. A unit is stationed outside. At any sign of danger, press the button. The day dragged on endlessly. I tried to keep busy with ordinary tasks, but my thoughts kept circling back to the evening. To the moment when Rodolfo would try to put his plan into action. At 5 o'clock, Mendoza called me. Valeria, your husband just bought another pack of phenazepam at the pharmacy. Be ready. My heart pounded faster. It had begun. At 6:30, Rodolfo came home. He looked calm, even slightly upbeat. Hello, darling, he said, kissing me. How are you? Good. And you? Excellent day. All the surgeries went well. He went into the bedroom to change. I heard him rummaging in the medicine cabinet, apparently hiding the new pack of tranquilizers. Valeria, I'll make us some tea, he called from the kitchen. This was it, the moment of truth. All right, I replied, clutching the panic button in my hand. I sat in the living room, listening to the sounds from the kitchen. The kettle boiling, the clink of cups. Then a faint rustle. He poured something into my cup. Valeria, the tea is ready. Come here. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. Rodolfo was standing at the table with 2 cups of tea. Sit down, darling, he said with a smile. I sat at the table. In front of me was the cup of tea that was supposed to be my last meal. How was your day? Rodolfo asked, watching me intently. Calm, I answered, bringing the cup to my lips. The tea smelled normal, but I knew, dissolved inside were tablets that would turn me into a vegetable. Valeria, you're not drinking, Rodolfo noted. It'll get cold. It's still hot, I said. No, drink a little. It calms the nerves. Calms forever. I raised the cup to my lips again and pressed the panic button. Drink, drink, Rodolfo urged, not taking his eyes off me. It's good for you. Rodolfo, what's in this tea? What? He looked slightly flustered. Nothing special, just tea with sugar. Then why are you so insistent that I drink it? His expression began to change. Valeria, what strange questions? Just drink the tea. At that moment, there was a loud knock on the door. Police! Open immediately! Rodolfo turned pale as a sheet. What? What the hell? The door swung open. I hadn't locked it. Lieutenant Vasquez and Sergeant Mendoza burst into the kitchen. Rodolfo Vargas, you are under arrest on suspicion of preparing to commit murder and forging medical documents, Vasquez announced, pulling out handcuffs. What? Rodolfo jumped up from the table. What are you talking about? What murder? Mendoza carefully took my cup of tea. We are seizing this liquid for forensic examination. Valeria, what's happening? Rodolfo asked in confusion. Explain to me. What's happening is that I read your correspondence with Isabella Castro, I said calmly, standing up from the table. I know about the plan with the tranquilizers and the forged psychiatric diagnosis. You can't read, you're blind. No, Rodolfo, I'm not blind. My vision was restored a week ago. He stared at me in horror and disbelief. That's impossible. Oh, it's very possible, and now I see you for who you really are. Vasquez snapped the handcuffs on him. Rodolfo Vargas, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in court. Valeria, this is a misunderstanding, he shouted as they led him out of the apartment. I never wanted to hurt you. It's all been misunderstood. In your messages, there is a clear plan to poison your wife with tranquilizers and have her forcibly committed to a psychiatric hospital with forged documents, said Mendoza. Plus, direct threats of murder. We have all the evidence. What messages? Valeria, what are they talking about? About your correspondence with Isabella Castro, the one you call Sunshine, where the 2 of you planned my death. When Rodolfo was taken away, the apartment grew very quiet. Mendoza stayed with me to take my statement. Valeria, you are now completely safe, she said, but we will need your full account of what happened. Of course, I nodded. I'll tell you everything. Tell me, When exactly did your sight return? November 6th. Exactly a week ago. Why didn't you tell your husband? I wanted to make sure it was permanent first. And then I saw how he had changed. I began to observe him and realized he was deceiving me. If you had drunk that tea, what would have happened? Phenazepam in a high dose causes severe drowsiness, confusion, and loss of coordination. In such a state, it would have been very easy to present you as mentally ill. I shuddered. It could have all ended so differently. And what will happen to Rodolfo now? Attempted murder, forgery of medical documents, conspiracy to commit involuntary hospitalization, at least 7 or 8 years, plus permanent revocation of his license to practice medicine. And Isabella? We arrested her at the same time as your husband. If we prove her complicity in preparing the crime, she'll serve time as well. Late that night, after all the formalities were completed, I was left alone in the apartment. I sat on the sofa, thinking about how quickly life can change. In the morning, I was a wife, planning to tell her husband about the miracle of restored vision. By evening, I was a witness in an attempted murder case. Today marks exactly 1 year since the day I dialed 911. I'm sitting at my computer in my office at the Architectural Bureau, writing this story. Yes, I went back to work. My vision has recovered to 85%. The doctors still call it a medical miracle. 6 months ago, the trial was held. Rodolfo was sentenced to 8 years in a maximum security prison for attempted murder, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit involuntary hospitalization. Isabella received 5 years for complicity in the crime. Dr. Esteban Vargas, the psychiatrist who agreed to write the false report, was sentenced to 10 years for corruption and abuse of his professional position. Defendant Vargas, the judge said as he read the verdict, you, being a doctor by training and a husband by status, planned to poison your own wife and place her in a psychiatric hospital for subsequent murder. Only chance, the restoration of the victim's sight, and her timely call to emergency services prevented this grave crime. Rodolfo sat on the defendant's bench, pale and aged. Several times he tried to glance my way, but I turned away. I had nothing to say to him. The divorce was finalized in absentia. The apartment did indeed remain mine. It had been purchased with money from the sale of the house I inherited from my grandmother. Rodolfo had no rights to it. Disability benefits stopped after my vision was restored, but my salary as an architect is more than enough for a comfortable life. Luna is no longer a guide dog, but simply a beloved pet. We walk in the park every day, and she still senses my mood better than most people. 6 months ago, I met Alejandro. He's also an architect working at another firm, recently divorced, with a teenage daughter. We're just friends for now, but things are slowly developing. Valeria, he asked me recently, aren't you afraid to trust a man again after everything you've been through? I am, I admitted honestly. But you know what struck me most about that story? What exactly? Not that Rodolfo stopped loving me. People are allowed to fall out of love. It's a normal part of life. What struck me was how far he was willing to go in cruelty and treachery for the sake of money and a new relationship. And if he had simply come to you and said honestly, Valeria, I can't do this anymore, I've met someone else, then it would have hurt terribly, but I would have understood. 7 years with a disabled partner, that's a hard trial. Not everyone can endure it. And now I know the most important thing. If a person is capable of planning the murder of someone close, then he never loved them. It was calculation, convenience, habit, but not love. Yesterday, investigator Ramirez called me. Valeria, I have interesting news for you. Your case has become a textbook example at the police academy. We show it to cadets as an illustration of how important it is to take every emergency call seriously. Even the unbelievable ones? Especially the unbelievable ones. If the operator had treated your call formally, you might not be alive today. It's true, that call to 911 quite literally saved my life. Sometimes I think, what if my sight had never returned? Rodolfo would have carried out his plan, and no one would have ever known the truth. I would have died in a psychiatric hospital as a patient with suicidal tendencies, and he would have gotten the apartment, the money, and the chance to marry Isabella. But my sight did return, and I saw, in both the literal and figurative sense, who was really beside me. This morning, on the anniversary of my revelation, I got up early and stood for a long time at the window, watching the city wake up. People hurrying about their business, children going to school, ordinary, simple, real life. The sun was shining outside. I saw it. I felt its warmth on my face. 7 years ago, I lost my sight in the fire. 1 year ago, I regained it. But the most important sight of all is the ability to see people for who they truly are.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.